The green flag at the back tells us we go racing in 5 lights time. And the Austrian Grand Prix is underway. Perfect reaction time for Max Verstappen. He's got what he needed off the line. George Russell will put pressure on Lando Norris, but the top 3 were as they were. That was brave around the outside for Lewis Hamilton, but did he overtake off the road when he was battling Carlos Sainz? They'll work it out later. For second place we go, with George Russell momentarily ahead, but Lando Norris with the inside line. Can Hamilton get the job done against Carlos Sainz? He can, but there'll be a question of whether he did so off the road. Max Verstappen checking out front as Oscar Piastri goes wheel to wheel with Sergio Perez. It's Verstappen, then Norris, Russell, Hamilton up a place, Sainz down 1, and Piastri climbed up to 6th position.
Perfect start once again for Verstappen. Piastri is ushered wide to the gravel. He's going to lose a place to Leclerc as well, and Perez has made 2 places in that, right down in 6th place.
Nose change for Charles Leclerc.
Let's see on board with Leclerc now. That's his teammate ahead, Hamilton on the side. Leclerc gets the whack with Piastri then.
At the moment, Lewis Hamilton trying to make the pass. He's been so racy at the start of this one. Past Carlos Sainz on the first lap. On the third lap, he's going to be past his teammate. And Lewis Hamilton is up to 3rd position. His best start to a Grand Prix so far this year in terms of places gained. He's on the attack, but George Russell wants the place back. Will they play fairly? Wasn't even a contest. Russell retakes P3.
Okay, Lewis, we're under investigation for turn 1, so we need to let Sainz past.
So there was the instruction on the radio from Pete Bonington, the race engineer for Lewis Hamilton.
He actually is still benefiting from that move at the start because Sainz has not got the DRS from Russell that he otherwise might have had, so now he's vulnerable, and here comes Hamilton on the outside.
Sainz hugged that inside line, desperate to hang on to it, and he keeps track position for the moment.
Yeah, both of them will be losing lap time. You see the battle, Piastri and Perez, and well, we know Piastri is not happy, looking to go around the outside.
Can he do it? Yes, he takes the place, and Piastri forced to go the long way round, and he gets the position back.
Let's see what happened to Zhou. Through goes Daniel Ricciardo. Oh, and ahead.
What the is he doing?
So we believe it was Alonso. It was Alonso. Alonso into the side to Zhou. Zhou not happy at all as he rejoins. Alonso's been given a 10-second time penalty for causing a collision with Zhou Guan Yu.
These 2 Alpines, they're not the best of mates, are they? So Gasly has a look to the inside, and Ocon just sort of wafts towards the inside, says, don't try that one. It's so easy to have a lock up there and clatter into the car ahead, but Gasly managed to measure that one quite well.
He's going to pass Fernando faster, losing travel.
Copy that. Ocon finally does pass Fernando Alonso.
Yeah, did so at turn number 1. Alonso trying to come back. Huge amount of speed. 1 Alpine has gone through. So has the second one. Alonso has run out of tyres as we run wheel to wheel. And again, the Alpines are providing us with on-track action. The team won't like it, but it's brilliant entertainment for us. Ocon on the left-hand side, on board with Pierre Gasly. 1 driver on the left leaving the team. And that was a chop across the bows there of Gasly, who's now trying to go to the outside line. He's trying to keep 2 wheels on the racetrack. He's done that. The outside line will become the inside line. And Ocon can't stay in the battle. Gasly gets by and takes 8th place. That is Oscar Piastri getting to the apex first, and Piastri worked hard for that move, coming through and taking what is currently 3rd place away from Lewis Hamilton.
Verstappen sweeps in, Norris sweeps in just behind. Lando's got a set of mediums.
Hold on, was that slow? Was that slow? Sorry, Jolien cutting across. Was that a slow stop?
They waited for the release, took no chances, so that will definitely have played to the advantage of McLaren.
Yeah, left rear, very slow coming off, and then, because it was slow, he then had to wait for Norris as well once the left rear was attached. They've had the helping hand of a slow stop.
He's gone wide.
Oh, he did lock up. Did he make the corner? Oh, my word. Pushing on the outlap there. The gap was 7 seconds. It's now 1.7 seconds. This is where he got past in the sprint yesterday. Lando Norris, is he brave immediately again? This time Verstappen covers it off. This Grand Prix has come alive. Is it late again? Is it great again for Lando Norris, who tries to slow it down, but he overtook him off the road? What a late lunge it was, but he'll have to give that place back, and he knows it.
He can't keep moving after I've moved. It's just dangerous. Oh, we've got to have a big shot. He forced me to go wide and look off.
Battles for the lead decided late on here between Verstappen and Charles Leclerc. It went to the last lap in 2016 between the Mercedes pair, and now on lap 63, Lando Norris slows it down. That one will count if he can stand on the power. Max Verstappen was off the road to maintain the place. There'll be all sorts of investigations there. What a battle between the top two in Formula One.
Yeah, he has to give the position back. I was ahead at the apex. Yeah, and he went off track.
Game on once again. This time it's the outside line. Oh, they make contact. He's got a puncher. He's damaged his front wing. The leading contenders for the World Championship come together at turn 3. The crowd can't believe it. And George Russell will be looking at the gap. He's the man in third after Verstappen and Norris come together chasing the lead.
Incredible. Norris has got a puncture as well, has he? Or is he just going around Verstappen, who's crawling? Verstappen's going to tumble all the way down. I think Norris is struggling.
Norris gets to the lead of the race, but what condition is the car in?
George, you can win this. You can win this, George. Just let him drive.
And Norris is struggling. George Russell is catching the pair of them. The man who's got one victory in Formula One might be about to take the lead.
Nice. Oh my God.
There it is. There's the moment. George Russell into the lead of the Austrian Grand Prix. Can you believe what we're seeing? Verstappen and Norris fighting lap after lap, and it's the door swung wide open for George Russell, who leads Carlos Sainz by 2.2 seconds. On board with Oscar Piastri going alongside, trying to take second place. This is absolutely unbelievable stuff. Piastri, now a contender to win this Grand Prix. He's up to second. What a move. And for just the second time in Formula One, the British driver will see the flag first, and George Russell wins an amazing Austrian Grand Prix. He beats Oscar Piastri home by 1.9 seconds. Carlos Sainz is back on the podium for the first time since Monaco.
This is the Outlap F1 podcast featuring America's own Cody, Andy, and Deanna. Your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. Join us on the Outlap. What is up, Outlap F1 Nation? This is Season 6. This is Episode 24. It's the 2024 Austrian GP Race Review Show. Andy's back. He is back from up north. You've got Andy, and I am along with Cody tonight. It is good to see you again, sir. How did the North treat you, first and foremost, and how you doing otherwise?
It was great. It was very relaxing. I love the North Woods of Wisconsin, and yeah, I got some great time in the great outdoors, some fishing. Fishing could have been a little bit better, but I'll take what I can get. A couple nice bass and some good quality time with the old man. So yeah, rested, relaxed, and ready to get back to it. And I got to watch a couple good races during the time up there.
You did indeed. You've lucked into good 2 legs of this triple header. If the third one is going to be the capstone, oh boy. But we're going to get into all that in just a little bit. So if you found us, welcome along, as David Croft would say. You can find us as always, Twitter, X, whatever Elon Musk is calling his platform these days, Instagram, Discord, Reddit, and of course YouTube. We are doing video tonight, so if you happen to like what you're seeing or enjoy what you're hearing, you can, as the kids do, smash that subscribe button, or you can also leave us a like. If you're on your favorite podcasting app, you can leave us a 5-star review. What does all that do? It doesn't do us any money. We're not getting paid for this yet. All it does is allow us to come up a little bit better in search results, get our content to you that much quicker. So we would appreciate it if you would like to do those things. You can email the show, chatnow@outlapf1.com, takes you there. Thank you so much to the people who do support us monetarily. Thanks always to Dean Warwick, Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, and of course, Jonathan Scott. If you'd like to add your name to this list and get shouted out every time we record, we'd like to do that. You can see our show notes. It's our anchor page, $1 or $5. What does that do? All goes into upgrading equipment we already have, or making the equipment, or finding new equipment to make the show better, work a little smoother, make the product overall better for you, the listener. Final reminder, you can find our code OUTLAP with the good folks at Manscaped. That will get you 20% off and free shipping of their incredible product line. So we have had a race to talk about. We're going to get into all that in just a little bit, but it is time for the headline of the day. Cody, what you got?
All right, my headline of the day is Friendship Over. The Verstappen villain era has entered a new stage. Oh, and George won.
It feels like covering this and all the coverage I've seen. It's kind of what gets lost in all this. Oh yeah, remember that guy? He actually is the one that won the race. But my quickie headline is nice guys finish last. And I think Lando Norris kind of learned that lesson a little bit. And my more expansive headline is the gloves between Norris and Verstappen, they are officially off now. And we were always going to get here. Once these two were the ones that were the two quickest, it was always going to end up at this place at some point in time. It's now happened. So is it all changed from here? What happens now? So we're going to get into all that. We're going to try to answer those questions as we get into things. But it was a sprint weekend in Austria over the course of the weekend. So we have a lot of sessions to go with, and we will start. So we will start with the sprint qualifying, SQ1, SQ2, and SQ3. And that kicks off with... All right, so going out in P20 with that was the Kick Sauber of Zhao Guanyu. P19, Alex Albon. P18 was Valtteri Bottas. P17, Nico Hulkenberg. P16, Daniel Ricciardo. P15, surprisingly good showing here. Here's Logan Sargent in the Williams, making SQ2. P14, Yuki Tsunoda. P13 was Fernando Alonso. P12, Lance Stroll. And P11, just missing out on the top 10 shootout, was Kevin Magnussen. That top 10 from 10 to 1. P10, Charles Leclerc. Have to talk about what happened to him. He did not set a lap time. P9 was Pierre Gasly. P8, Esteban Ocon. P7, Sergio Perez. P6, Lewis Hamilton. P5, Carlos Sainz. P4, George Russell. P3, Oscar Piastri. P2, Lando Norris. And just with enough margin, 0.093 seconds, the gap. Thanos the inevitable in P1 again. Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. All right. Big thoughts on sprint quali?
For me, it's the very rare occasion that Logan Sargent outqualified Alex Albon on apparently actual pace, which was very strange as the results were coming through. I was like, whoa, what? Really? Maybe he's onto something here. And as you know, we're going to get into probably a little later in this podcast. It didn't really last much beyond this session, but it was good to see. Also, the margin here for the sprint qualification between Max and Lando was very thin. Could have, I think, at this point, really gone either way. I think this is a lot of evidence that, as we've seen for the last couple races now, that the McLaren pace is real. It is there. And you hear a lot of the talking heads talking about, is the Red Bull even the fastest car right now? You know, Max Verstappen seems to be doing Max things with it and continuing to fight for pole and for victory. But we see that his, peer, Sergio Perez, not doing as well. And, both of the McLarens are right up there at the front on very close margin. So it's here. I think they're here to stay unless Red Bull can put together some super upgrade over the summer break.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the upgrades, it was interesting. McLaren actually brought another significant front wing package that apparently they like to try to do this in a sprint weekend, which is usually not the traditional way that you would develop upgrades, but apparently that's what they just chose to do. So they did kind of all their setup work in FP1 and, put it on the car in qualifying and look what happened. Lando had actually crossed the line first and then actually had the pole for a good maybe 20, 30 seconds according to timing. And then Max's lap was, I think, 4 purple mini sectors in the third sector, and that's pretty much what did it. But it was good to see the challenge there. Do have to talk a little bit about Charles Leclerc not setting a lap time. Apparently his engine went into anti-stall as he was coming out. And because everybody waited. Now, you're a victim of your own creation. You have 8 minutes in SQ3, and nobody chose to go out. They were all going to wait till the end. With about 2 minutes to go, all 10 drivers sprung from their garages to line up to go get the gap for their SQ3 run, the only run on the soft tire. And for whatever reason, Charles Leclerc's engine went into anti-stall, and he could not make it move forward. And by the time he got it out of anti-stall, did the Control-Alt-Delete and all of that, he ran out of time. He had basically, I think, a minute and 10. He basically would have had to set a hot lap as his out lap to even try to make the flag, and he did not. So it was interesting on the timing. It says, first car to take checkered flag, 16, Charles Leclerc. No time. So that was kind of a gaffe there. I did see a couple fun videos about people reacting to that, so it was kind of interesting. But very tight sprint qualifying, of course, what you would kind of expect here. So we now transition into Saturday morning, and if you were in the U.S., it was very AM, very, very AM. In fact, I literally watched the sun come up. I started it in the dark, and I finished it, and it was light out. But we will go through the sprint results very quickly. The P20, again, bad, just kind of painful weekend for the kick salvers all weekend. Zhao Guan Yu coming in the last place. P19, Nico Hulkenberg. P8, Hulkenberg down there because he was assessed a 10-second penalty. We will talk a little bit about that. P18, Valtteri Bottas. P17, Alex Albon. P16, Logan Sargent. P15, Fernando Alonso as the Aston Martins continued to struggle. P14 was Daniel Ricciardo. P13, Yuki Tsunoda. V-Carb's doing a little bit better, but still probably not where they would like to be. P12, Pierre Gasly. P11, Esteban Ocon. P10 was Lance Stroll. P9 was Kevin Magnussen. And now your points finishers. P8 was Sergio Perez. P7, Charles Leclerc rallying a little bit. P6 was Lewis Hamilton. P5, Carlos Sainz. P4, George Russell. P3 was Lando Norris. P2 was Oscar Piastri. Hello, it's a sprint weekend, therefore Oscar becomes good again. And in P1, the inevitable continued. Max Verstappen asserting his domination over this track, at least that was the narrative, through Saturday with the sprint race victory. Cody, big thoughts on the sprint?
So after the sprint, that margin of victory doesn't seem that large, the 4.6, but we have to remember it's over a significantly smaller race distance. So I figured at this point, Max probably had the Grand Prix in the bag. And as you said, with Oscar Piastri, we know that he is very fast. He comes to life during these sprints where things like tire preservation and strategy play less of a part. He's way up here in P2, looking fantastic. And yeah, as stated during the sprint qualifying, we actually saw Logan Sargent finish in front of Alex Albon again on pace. Now it was a very small margin, but he did hold on to it. So the rare occurrence, things are looking up for Logie Bear.
This actually was, I think, the track. He took a win here in F2 the year before he got promoted, and it was one of the more impressive drives I've ever seen Logan Sargent do, because he was actually on the not ideal strategy, and he got an ill-timed safety car, and it looked like he was going to get hung out on that strategy, and he somehow made it work. And that was like, you can take all the F1 career and put it to the side. That race, he was great on that day. So I know it's possible because I've seen it. But other big thoughts on the sprint. We do got to talk a little bit about what proves to be a harbinger of things to come, especially early. Lando Norris going at Max Verstappen in the early couple of laps, attempting to get the lead early. Almost did, but Max with a great little counter move. Lando kind of a little over aggressive, a bit of a dive bomb here, if I'm being honest. but he's unable to get it stopped. And that allowed his teammate, Oscar Piastri, to just kind of slip in underneath him and take over P2. After that, it kind of turned into, for a long time, a pretty giant DRS train until Max actually broke it. And at that point, it was really hard to kind of see a whole lot of movement. It's kind of you look at this track, there's definitely lots of good natural places to overtake, but it didn't seem like anybody wanted to take excess risk, especially in the sprint. So it kind of wasn't, after the first couple laps, it really wasn't anything really to write home about, at least for me. But what do you think about the overall entertainment value of the sprint?
I thought it was all right. Definitely not like the greatest sprint that we've ever seen, but the sprint format is growing on me. I still feel that it's something that is, it's like a little treat. It should be saved for, a race weekend here and there. Definitely not to be applied to every race weekend, but I do enjoy them. I completely forgot about this sprint until like the day before, when I was checking to see what time the Grand Prix was going to be on Sunday, and I was like, "Oh, I get a little extra," and it was entertaining. It was fun. I still think that the format could be tweaked a little better, but I think that the way that they're running it right now with the different parc fermé rules is working out pretty well so far.
Yeah, so I mean, you got to kind of get some long run running in. We definitely got to see some degradation on the medium tire because that was pretty much what everybody ran here. So, that was at least good for the overall data gathering that everybody usually misses out on. So, but, again, I think everyone was very, very well behaved. Nobody really wanted to put a whole lot of feet wrong. And I think the main focus was kind of, okay, whatever you did in the sprint, take it, put it to the side, and focus on the main race. And that's what everybody tried to do. So I will re-rack the noise here. And then we moved on to the traditional qualifying later on in the AM in the US. So here we go with that. All right. So going out, P20 again. I feel like a broken record. That was Zhao Guan Yu in the Kick Sauber. Yikes. P19. Sprint quali good. Not so good here. That was Logan Sargent in the Williams. P18, Valtteri Bottas in the other Kick Sauber. P17, Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin. Ouch. P16 was Alex Albon. Just making Q2, the other Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso. Also ouch. P14 was Yuki Tsunoda. P13 was Pierre Gasly. P12 was Kevin Magnussen. P11, Daniel Ricciardo. Hello, how you doing there? The top 10 from 10 to 1. P10 was Esteban Ocon. P9, Nico Hulkenberg of the other Haas. P8, Sergio Perez. P7, have to talk about how he ended up here. That was Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. P6 was Charles Leclerc. P5 was Lewis Hamilton. P4 was Carlos Sainz. P3 was George Russell. P2 was Lando Norris. And in P1, with a bigger gap this time, almost 0.4 of a second, Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, taking that parc fermé rule and running with it. Yow. All right. So big thoughts on the main qualifying. Cody, I'll let you go first.
Same feeling here as I felt after the sprint race. That qualifying gap, as you said, between Max and Lando, significantly larger. 0.4 is a pretty healthy gap between 1 and 2. And I, once again, figured that Max was going to run away with this one. He has been very, very successful at this track over the years. So I thought he had it in the bag. And as we'll discuss in a little bit, I was very wrong. But
well, you were for a lot of it. You were for a good chunk of this race. That was a pretty logical conclusion.
Yep. Charles Leclerc just didn't really seem to be having any luck this weekend. 6th place, better than what he had in the sprint qualification, but still not terribly great. And then looking all the way at the bottom here, yeah, you're talking about being a broken record with Zhou Guan Yu. I'm guessing both he and Logan Sargent, unfortunately for them, will be out of a job next year.
Looking more and more like that, at least. Definitely, I think, for Logan Sargent. I've heard some rumors about Zhou Guan Yu, maybe an Alpine seat. It's still going to all come down to Carlos Sainz and what he chooses to do, and he should probably start to choose quickly because I think teams really kind of want to make up their minds, and they're going to do it without him if he doesn't pick one. But anyway, one name you can take off the board, by the way, we didn't get a chance to talk about this, was Pierre Gasly. He re-ups with Alpine into the new regulations. So take that name off the board. Take one Alpine seat off the board of your merry-go-round there. But in terms of the traditional qualifying, other than the gap between Lando and Max, which I was like, wow, that was interesting, even though Lando did go, well, let's see. Did he go slightly Yeah, he went slightly quicker in Q3 than SQ3. But Max, whatever they did to that car between the end of the sprint and qualifying, boy, was that dialed in, because Max wasn't even close to anybody in the sessions throughout this thing. You never really thought it was in any doubt. All Max had to do was kind of get there, and get there he did. One thing I do want to talk about, and if you remember back to last year, one of the huge stories through Austria was, of course, track limits. And lots of track limit notices and lap times getting deleted left, right, and center. And one of the smart things that the track did, they said, and I remember reading this even last year, they said, we're going to do something to address this. And what I thought they came up with was actually a really good idea. Was they basically took and they measured where if you go off, now there's a strip of gravel there. And you can cover that gravel up for when MotoGP comes into town in a few weeks, and you can make it smooth. But when F1 is here, you have now a natural deterrent. And boy, did that, I think, overall help the product a lot. So your turn 9, turn 10, where you always see people trying to go a little bit wide and take the, where is the line and where is your tire and all that stuff. Really good, smart solution. They also put that in turn 6. Now, here's the thing about turn 6. It doesn't look like that would be a place where you would necessarily gain any sort of an advantage by going wide, but sometimes you just do. All of the lap times that were deleted in this qualifying session were all in turn 6, by the way, including one Oscar Piastri's, who would have lined up in P3, but for millimetric somehow being shown to be over the line. And I've said many times on this show that Oscar is just calm almost to a fault. On the radio, that was about as animated as I've ever heard him in an F1 car. When he comes on the radio and they tell him that his lap time is deleted, he goes, "What?" And then he goes, "Where?" And they tell him turn 6. And he goes, "How?" He goes, "There's gravel there. I didn't touch the gravel." And then he goes out and he made this entire statement. And I really thought that it was a well thought out statement where he says, look, they put in this gravel thing. If I don't touch the gravel, that should ultimately be I should be okay. Why is it we're measuring here and not there? And why didn't they measure the gravel right? So the FIA, I think, got 99.9% of this stuff right. And somehow we still found a hole to find a track limit, not controversy, but issue.
Yeah.
And I felt really bad for Piastri because he put together one hell of a Q3 lap.
Yeah. Oscar Piastri is another guy so far this season that seems to just have a rotten string of luck. And you look at the image where he's, supposedly went off track or outside of the bounds, and it is really close. So close, in fact, that McLaren actually, lodged for an appeal to see if they could get his lap time reinstated. Ultimately, that did not bear fruit, and he did start back in 7th. But yeah, incredibly close there. As far as what you're saying about the success of the gravel traps, I agree with you completely. You look at what happened last year and the comical number of penalties that were handed out for track limit violations. And then this year, the proof is in the pudding. There was so much fewer issues. I guess Lando Norris did actually get a penalty at the end of the race that ended up not making a difference. But he did get a penalty for track limit violations during the Grand Prix. But yeah, it's night and day compared to what happened last year and this year.
I wonder if they will move that gravel trap a quarter of an inch closer next year. Just,
you never know.
It's one of those, you can just cut it a little bit closer. But yeah, I mean, it was just very unfortunate for Oscar. I did like the fact that McLaren lodged the protest and were willing to fight for one of their guys. And sometimes, the perception is this is Lando's team and they only do stuff for Lando. No, that's not how this is. Like Andrea Stella, as we're going to talk about later on, that's my team principal right there. I'm going to go to battle with that guy because I just love the way of how he goes about saying thoughtful, interesting, poignant remarks that actually have some weight behind them. And he said, look, we've seen other examples where lap times, the computer says out and reinstated, and we don't necessarily think we're going to win, but we want to bring the issue up. And it also tells Oscar Piastri, hey, we're willing to fight for you here. And I think that's, they lost the protest and they took a good 4 hours to rule on the protest and they kicked it out on the technicality of, well, you didn't show us anything new, which, what else new are you going to bring to the table other than the angles that you were given from the world feed and all your onboards? So I didn't expect them to win that, but I was glad that they did it because I think that tells Piastri, hey, we're willing to fight for you if we think we got ground. So that was interesting. But I mean, other than Sergio Perez not showing up again, this is now becoming a thing. I guess other positive things, Nico Hulkenberg, P9, that was cool. And P10, Esteban Ocon, P11, Daniel Ricciardo. I mean, all very, very, very close. So the midfield getting more and more interesting as we shall do some talking about it in the race itself. But we will now transition into that race itself. And we will start with the back markers, which probably means we're going to talk about a lot of our flashpoints. But we have to start because he finished in P20. Nice guys finished last. Lando Norris in the McLaren, technically classified, which is a big deal. And we'll talk about why that's a big deal. 7 laps down on the race winner. P19 was Logan Sargent. P18, Fernando Alonso. P17 was Zhao Guanyu. P16, Valtteri Bottas. P15, Alex Albon. P14 was Yuki Tsunoda. And P13 was Lance Stroll. All right. Other than Lando, any thoughts on the back markers before we kind of get into all of this?
Oh, let's see here. All of Logan Sargent's pizzazz was gone. 2 laps down at the end of the race. Not looking too good there. Did have a little bit of, I guess I would say, sloppy, uncharacteristically sloppy racing from Fernando Alonso at some points. I believe he did get a penalty for some of
yes, he did.
He did during the race, if I remember correctly. Yeah, a little bit of sloppy there, and yeah, just not a good weekend for the Aston Martins overall. Lance Stroll did finish significantly better, but still well outside the points and a lap down. Other than that, I really wish we were seeing the Williams further up. I miss seeing Alex Albon fighting for points. So hopefully they'll make a comeback at some point. Valtteri Bottas continuing to outshine, Zhou Guanyu, which is a little bit of a shame. Zhou Guanyu seems like a good character to have in Formula One. Seems like a nice stand-up guy, but he's really got to turn something around quick here, even being in the worst car on the grid, because he's regularly qualifying at the back, finishing at the back. Can't do that forever.
Yeah, I would say my biggest big picture thing is sarcastic Fernando Alonso is now back. And that's a bad thing if you're an Aston Martin fan, because the little egg timer that goes, when does he get pissed, is getting closer and closer to going off. And I thought the moment was very poignant when he got passed by not one, but 2 Alpines. And he came on the radio and he said something. It was like lovely or great or something like that. They put the little graphic up of what he said. And I was just like, I have seen this movie before and it doesn't end well for the team in green, because just wait before he starts criticizing updates and criticizing parts. Oh boy.
we're still a little ways away
Yeah,
from GP2 engine comments, but
no,
it's getting there.
we're getting there. But he also did the thing that he also likes to do when he's kind of mad, where throw on the set of soft tires at the end. I don't care if I'm last on the road. I'm setting a fastest lap. Damn it! And he did. And it actually might prove, I don't know that it's going to prove to be significant or not, but it proved to be a significant end note for the race, which was kind of just a thing to take it away from the guy who had it, which I thought was an interesting little side note. But
Mhm.
all right, I want to do the midfield, and then when we do the podium, I think we'll put Lando into that discussion because he was up there for most of it. So we'll just talk about the midfield first. So P12 was Esteban Ocon in the Alpine. P11, the multiple pit stop strategy of one Charles Leclerc is still confusing to me, and it did not result in points, even though apparently there were like 3 different Ferrari simulations that thought it could. But P10 was Pierre Gasly, so Alpine back in the points again. P9, is it too little too late? But you got to give props when they're here. Danny Rick in the V-Carb wills that car into the points. 2 big points for them. P8, the other stars of this, like beyond the front, I thought the star of this weekend were the 2 Haas's in Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hulkenberg. Double points, P8 for Kevin Magnussen, P6 for Nico Hulkenberg. And fighting off and passing Sergio Perez in P7. Hello, how you doing?
That was fantastic. I thought that was like the icing on the cake.
Oh,
for this race,
I mean,
was he gets back Perez.
Lost in the kerfuffle that we're going to talk about is all of this cool stuff that was going on. So P5, that's where we find Max Verstappen not winning, as we're going to talk about. And P4 was Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. So other than Max, again, we're going to take the Max and Lando thing and kind of put it to the next part. What do you want to talk about in the midfield?
We had another really good on-track battle between the teammates Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon. And Pierre Gasly ended up finally getting the better of Ocon and gave a nice little cheery ciao as he went by. It's actually kind of a hoot watching these guys race against each other. They very, very clearly are still not friends, don't like each other very much. And it seems that maybe it's just gotten a little even more out in the open now that we know Esteban Ocon will not be returning to Alpine next year, whereas Pierre Gasly will be. But yeah, I enjoy their on-track battles. And it looked like that was going to be, for a lot of this race, the main interest, I guess, the main flair. Things up front for the majority of the race were relatively uneventful. But yeah, as you said here with the Haas drivers, even without what happened at the end of the race, they still would have both been in the points. And all it did was help them move even further up. I think P6 is best of the year for Nico Hulkenberg, who is really shining this year, I would say most of the time. P6 is excellent points for Haas. And as for those teams that are, tend to be just barely making points, everything counts. So they are really capitalizing this weekend. Lastly, Perez here. My gosh, man. It's just his contract is looking worse and worse by the race weekend. And I feel like I'm saying that every race weekend lately.
The weight just feels like it's getting heavier and heavier and heavier.
Yeah.
Man.
I'm sure there's some kind of clause in his contract for Red Bull to pull a switcheroo with RB or something if they want, or tear off the contract even, because he already wasn't performing super great before they gave him this extension. And supposedly I guess I shouldn't even say supposedly, they showed the damage at some point after the race. He did apparently have damage to the bottom of his car, which, as we know in this era is very important. You get damage to the floor and it can really affect the performance of the car. That said, you can't use that excuse forever. And, we're going to get into it here, but I'll just give you the quick of it. Max Verstappen had an incident. And despite that incident, and everything that went along with it, having to get around the track with a punctured tire, taking another pit stop and all that, he still finished two positions in front of Perez. That shouldn't be happening. They're driving the same car. And it to me, this is pretty damning that Max Verstappen can run into such issues and still outdo his teammate. Floor damage or not, Perez should have been able to pull out something better than a P7 here.
Well, I mean, you go back to the qualifying sessions. He had no damage in the sprint qualifying. He had no damage in the main qualifying. And where was he? 6 positions clear, not in front of his teammate or anywhere near. And there's lots of contenders in between him. And it just feels like this is kind of, there's the Perez not being up there again. Since that contract has been signed, he has not shown well. This is just reality. There's just data on this now. I don't know where, I have not heard any mumblings in the Red Bull circles about making a change or anything like that. But, and again, it comes back to just the overall, what I've been saying, that Red Bull has such a high ground in the math, even going into this round, that it probably isn't going to matter. And maybe they will just bite the bullet and take what it is and maybe try to reevaluate at the end of the season. But this is now this is a thing. And you reset the points to 0 next year and you put Max in the same fight that he's getting into now. He needs a teammate. You have to have a rear gunner. This would have been a prime example if we had a constructor fight, if we had a legit constructor fight, why it matters. Because one team had a guy come in P2 when the main guy went out, and the other team, despite the fact, comes home in P5 because Max is Max. I think that's really all I can say about that. That's how he ends up in P5, because he's just still really, really freaking good. But where was the teammate to step up? I mean, if Max had to DNF there, that there's 25 points gone from your potential score. And Sergio was nowhere to pick it up. And yeah, I just think next year it's going to come to a head at some point. And then what do they do, and how does that fallout get managed? Especially given the dichotomy between what it seems Christian Horner wants and what it seems Helmut Marko wants. So all of that is still playing on in the background of all of this. And meanwhile, Sergio is not helping anybody's case whatsoever. So we will move into the actual podium, and then we'll talk about all of the fun. So P3 was Carlos Sainz. P2 was Oscar Piastri, rallying from P7. And P1 turns out to be George Russell, who inherits the win after the cavalcade of what I'm just going to call the 4 incidents. So let's set the stage. We had pretty much a ho-hum, kind of predictable Austrian Grand Prix. Max Verstappen comfortably in the lead. Lando Norris in second. Gap is about 7.5 seconds. They get through the first pit stop. Max is just extending out, no stress. Everything's fine and dandy. The Orange Army is happy. They're coming up with new dance routines, in the stands. And, it's just going to kind of end. And that was kind of how I thought it was going to end. I'm like, well, Lando, yeah, they'd said that he had a new set of medium tires late, but even if he pushes really hard, it didn't look like he was going to get anywhere within other than maybe a couple seconds closer. So I'm like, okay, well, 7 will become 5 seconds or 3 seconds by the end, but I don't see, any sort of a battle coming out here. And then, as F1 likes to do, and I've said this all the time, the sport will give it to you when, of course, you least expect it. So if you happen to turn your TV off with, 20 laps to go thinking this was done, boy, did you miss out. Because the second pit stop happens and Max comes in and then Lando follows him in, which was also kind of interesting because why wouldn't McLaren at least attempt to put Lando in clean air for a lap and maybe try to bridge the gap a little bit? So that didn't happen. So you were basically saying McLaren was almost saying, look, we're happy with the P2. It's probably all we're going to get. All done. And I'm watching from Lando's onboard, as I always do when he comes into the pits. And I just happened to notice out of the corner of my eye as Lando's coming down the pit lane, Max is still there. What's Max doing there? That's odd. He crossed him. Like, I was not expecting to see that. And he comes out, and Max is back ahead. But when they get to the end and they get past where the pit lane limiter is, I can still see Max's rear view in Lando's onboard. And I went, that's a whole of a lot closer than 7 seconds. So it's a 6.9 second stop for Max. The right rear was the culprit here. Apparently, they could not get the nut to come off. It took several attempts with the gun. They finally get it off, and then a new tire goes on. But Max's nice little healthy 7-second lead, not so much. The other factor that comes into this is, as I mentioned before, McLaren had saved 2 sets of new tires, medium tires, for the end of the race. Max had 2 sets of new hard tires for the end of the race, but elected, because there was only about 20 laps to go, to send Max out on a used set of mediums, which had gone through a 4-lap cycle in, I think, one of the SQ sessions. So we end up now with Max on slightly older tires. He's got to try to bring in. He doesn't really have an opportunity. And then on the outlap, he has a big lockup. I think it was into turn 4. It was turn 4, where he had the big lockup. And suddenly, that 7-second comfortable as you like gap is now down to a 1.25 seconds. And Lando, the next lap, is now in DRS range. And here we go. Now, let's go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is funny from my perspective because I'm up north. I am helping clean up the cottage and packing and getting ready to go home. I just got the race on in the background, watching it on the side while I'm doing some dishes, thinking, yeah, I know where this race is going to go. Max Verstappen's going to take it home. And as you said, all this kerfuffle happens in the pits where Max has a slow stop. It's even slower because he has to let Lando by before he can get out of the pits. He has that lockup, and I'm not even paying super close attention. I'm doing dishes, and all of a sudden the announcers start going crazy. And I look over and I had to rewind like 20 seconds because I was like, what the hell just happened? Lando's right behind him. And yeah, it was nuts. And then what resulted from that, the difference in tire life and, the McLaren perhaps coming to life on lower fuel, it really made for probably the best, in some ways, the best and most controversial battle we've had at the front so far this year.
Yeah. So you ended up with Lando. It felt like shades of Imola, but now we had more laps because I'm like, oh, Lando's got the pace, and you could see it in the data. Max clearly not happy, kind of complaining about pretty much anything he could. He didn't like the grip on the tires. I don't think he liked that particular set of tires. And now Lando's in DRS, but as what has become a universal truth, just because you're in DRS doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get passed anymore. And you are racing a guy who, when he's motivated, likes to play a little bit on the margins. Let's put it that way. And so I guess we'll go through what I would like to call kind of the 4 different turn 3 attempts by one Lando Norris to get past. The first one was probably much more of an what I would say, ambitious move than anything else. I didn't think he was going to get there. He tries to brake very late on going into turn 3. But what we saw from Max was kind of this thing where Lando had gone to the inside, had jinked back around to the outside, and Max also kind of covered the inside and then kind of moved over to the outside. So that was the kind of the aforementioned, or as we're going to talk about it, the specific Max Verstappen rule, which has been put into place to kind of prevent that kind of thing. And Lando got on the horn right away and said, he's doing double moves. And at the time when I saw it live, I was kind of like, okay, I get what you're doing, Lando, to put that into the steward's head, but I didn't see anything really wrong with it there. So I'm like, just go get him on the next lap. And I didn't think anything of it. So that was kind of incident 1. Incident 2 is they come around to another lap, another couple laps. I think this is the one with Lando on the inside. And I don't know.
it happened so many times.
Yeah, I was going to say
It's really kind of hard to keep track of what was what. It happened over many laps. I believe this one was the one where Lando kind of really made more of a dive bomb.
Oh
Of
yeah,
it
you're
and
right.
ended up
This
going
is the
off the
dive
track
bomb.
on his own.
This is the one where
Yeah.
he goes off the track and gets the penalty because he had been given a strike. If you go back to the sprint race, Lando tries this exact same move again, now for real, where they weren't being as nice, and Lando locks up and goes off. Actually, gets past Max here, but then because he realized he had gone off the track, gave the position back going into turn 6 and 7. So Max gets out ahead. That is Lando's fourth track limit violation. He wasn't aware of it at the time. Obviously, well, he was. He was aware that he was on a warning, but they didn't tell him that he had the penalty yet. So we figured, well, okay, Lando's got to try to get by, and now he's got to try to build a gap, which he might have been able to do. But at that point, I was kind of more frustrated. I'm like, oh, damn it, if Max can just hang around 2 seconds, it's probably not going to matter. But get the move done now and get yourself up the road. So now we come into incident number 3 again, turn 3 again. This is the one where Lando was on the inside this time, trying to push Max to the outside. Max actually goes off the track. Lando manages to stop the car. He's definitely pushed Max off. Max is off the track, but he now retakes P1 from what I have to say is an off the track position. And I don't know what more of a textbook definition you can have of going off track and gaining or keeping your advantage, but that looked pretty open and shut to me. But that didn't even get brought up in all of this, which is kind of hilarious. And then, of course, we have the fourth incident, the fatal one, where Lando is again trying to go to the outside. It looked like he was going to try to do a switchback where he was going to try to get Max to get to the outside, come back down to the inside, and then set it up for turn 4. What ended up happening was they banged wheels. Max leaves him a car width for a while and then suddenly doesn't in not the right spot. Max gets a puncture. We don't see Lando get a puncture initially. I'm still trying to figure out where Lando actually got the puncture. If it was from the banging or if it was from when Max kind of forced him into the grass later. I still haven't figured that part out. I'm going to say it's from the banging because that's got to be where it was. Because if it's the other way, that tire was just terrible. Then I don't understand why you could have that happen because, yeah, that just doesn't make sense to me. But both guys basically ended up ruining their races. Max loses the lead. Lando gets the lead for a minute, but can't get the car back to the pits as in nice of a condition. He retires. Max changes his tires, goes back out, does finish 5th, did set a fastest lap until the salty Fernando Alonso takes it from him on the very last lap just to say he did it, which I guess was kind of justice served. Verstappen is given a 10-second penalty for causing that collision on the 4th incident, although it didn't matter because he had such a gap to P6 that I think it even comes back even with the penalty. Just trying to look here. He's 37. Yeah, it's another 14 seconds or something away from being material enough. So it didn't matter. Max comes home in P5. Lando becomes the only retiree in the race and falls all the way to P20. And lo and behold, George Russell is there to pick up the fumble of both the McLaren and the Red Bull, and he takes the win. And oh, by the way, Oscar Piastri finishes 2nd. And lost in all that is a brilliant pass. I'm going to call this out because it was Oscar Piastri on Carlos Sainz going down. I think it's turns 5, 6, 7. It's not in a place you would expect to see a pass. On that lap with all of the chaos was just an amazing move. And I went back and watched it on his onboard. He just hung it out there. Woo!
Yeah, Oscar Piastri really capitalized on that, managed to turn what was looking like kind of a crappy, circumstance with the losing P3 in qualifying, gets a P2 out of it. Really did great. Yeah, had that awesome move on Carlos Sainz. And had he had no qualifying penalty, had he had perhaps just a few more laps to catch George Russell, because he was closing the gap there for a little bit, he might have come out of this with his first ever Grand Prix victory, which would have been really something. Fortunately, was not to be. George Russell was there in position to capitalize on the incident at the front, and he takes a very unexpected win. That he even sounded on the radio surprised that he got it, and you had that really funny dialogue between him and Toto, where Toto Wolff comes on the radio and says, "George, you can win this one. I think you can really win this one." George, shut the fuck up and let me drive. Essentially, but as a feel good moment for George. I don't think Mercedes ever saw that they were going to be coming out of this with a win. It's the first one since George Russell won in Brazil in 2022. So it's been a hot minute for them. But yeah, this battle between Verstappen and Lando, I think we're going to look back on as the moment it all started to come undone. We saw this happen between Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. They were at the same team, so it was even more dramatic. But I really think we're going to see, as you said at the beginning of the show, the gloves come off here. And we saw Verstappen's aggressive racing nature rear its ugly head here. We've heard so many people talking about how Max is much more mature now, and his driving style is more mature. He seems much more composed in interviews, and I think a lot of that is that he's just had the dominant car and hasn't really had to be pressured as much as he is now. And we've seen that when the pressure is on for the race victory, that aggressive nature is going to rear its ugly head and come back out. And Max is a ruthless winning machine. He will do everything in his power to capitalize and get the win. He will race dirty. We've seen that from a lot of extremely successful drivers in the past that will take everything to the limit. They're racing the cars, the rules. They will take every opportunity and bend every rule that they can to come out on top. And I think we saw a lot of that from Max. He's doing the moving under braking or the double moves. He's that he's on top of doing this stuff because he does it in such a way that it's controversial. The fact of the matter is penalties are a human thing. They're handed out by people. And if you can bend the rules and make it look like, I don't really know if it's a penalty, you might get away with that. And it seems like Max is really a master of doing that. You were talking about the one where he went off the track and kept an advantage. To me, that is Max capitalizing on that moment, being like, well, I can probably keep the lead if I go off the track, and I can probably craft this in such a way that it looks like he pushed me off the track. I'm pretty sure he said that over the radio too. Yeah. So he's going to do everything.
It was amazing how quickly he had the response to like what the question was going to be. And I don't know, I didn't watch it from Max's onboards, but I definitely watched it from Lando's. And Lando was like on the third one, he's like, I don't know what else to do because we're going to crash if he keeps doing this. And he said it point blankly. And then, of course, the next time around, that's exactly what happened. And there's a couple ways to look at this. There's the Lando one where I think he got the hard knocks education that I think he will need if he has aspirations of being a world champion. You now know what the final boss looks like. That's the final boss in level 8-4 of Super Mario. He's throwing the hammers and the fireballs and everything else at you to try to stop you from getting to the princess and the race victory. The other thing is I think we're finally seeing, and I've been saying, I've used this analogy for a while of, Lando's been in the arena, but he's not been in the ring. And he's kind of been the foil, but he really hasn't been an opponent. This race, Lando was as close to being a legit opponent to Max as I've seen since Lewis Hamilton in 2021. Because you saw, this is what happens when Max gets pushed. This is what happens when he's under stress and it's not comfortable. So one, it's fascinating to see how this dynamic is going to work towards the end of the season. And two, what the hell happens next year when there isn't the high ground and he can't just choose to do that? Because had he thrown a race victory away, again, I keep going, what if it was a 20-point lead and now you just threw away 15 points? And McLaren had a second driver right there to step up right in that moment. Red Bull didn't. That's got to come and pay some dividends later on down the line. So it's going to be a fascinating thing. In one sense, I was crushed to watch my favorite driver try so hard and not get there. But in the other way, I'm kind of like, he's finally getting into Max's brain a little bit. We haven't seen this in a while. So, and I come back to, as we'll talk about the points in a little bit, Lando really didn't lose anything. He lost the chance at a race victory, but in the big picture, they're okay. And they gained ground overall on Ferrari. The P2 battle in the constructors, which I thought was dead 5 rounds ago. You can go, I'm on recordings saying it's too much math. They're not going to do it. Now it looks like it's just a question of when and not if. But wow, I mean, so in one sense, I was bummed and I didn't want to be on any social media, and it was probably a good idea that I just closed the laptop because I've seen it all exploding and for various reasons. But in the other, I'm kind of like, bring on Great Britain, man. Lando now going to get motivated. Let's see if that lights a fire under him to come at it now that he knows what the rules are. It's going to be interesting to watch for sure. It's definitely going to be entertaining.
But I'm here for it, man.
Yeah.
I don't care if Max is racing rough. I think it just makes it all the more interesting.
Well, and it's got to take, and again, this is why I love what Andrea Stella said after the race, where he said, first of all, Max doesn't have to do that because we respect him way too much. And that just, I love how he did that. I just love how saying that. But then he said, look, if you don't correct it when he was learning what the rules were as a younger driver, and you don't tell him that that's wrong, he's never going to learn that. And I get, I get his overall point was that the penalty wasn't going to be enough. But I mean, that's kind of all it was going to be. When you're talking about sporting regs, I always say, the technical regs are the big book or the little book with the big consequences. And the sporting regs is the big book of regulations with the little consequences. And they don't always jive. And I think that's just a racing thing. So I'm not looking for Max. I didn't want to see Max get a grid drop. I've seen some other Lando fans get all up in arms about this. And I'm like, no, he got the penalty that he deserved. I thought he should have gotten one a lap earlier for leaving the track and gaining an advantage. And I would have loved for Lando to have had that knowledge in his pocket when he goes to make that move again, knowing, at least for me as a fan, knowing that he was going to get a 5-second penalty. So if Max gets a 5-second penalty, then I'm like, okay, fine, it's game on. But I was looking at it like, they would have canceled each other out, and then it's just wherever they finish because they were so far in front. No offense to George Russell, I know he gets the race win here, but he was 20 seconds behind all of that. And good on George. And I guess the thing for Mercedes is, we've talked about this too, they were in the position to grab it when somebody else fumbled. Why isn't Ferrari there? What happened to Carlos Sainz? What the hell happened to Charles Leclerc this weekend? That should have been, if we were going back to Bahrain and where the pecking order was, that should have been Ferrari's to grab, and it wasn't. And kudos for Mercedes for bringing those upgrades, for making that car better throughout the course of this season to be there to get that. And they get the benefit of it. So good on you, George. And he's a nice guy, and I enjoy watching him celebrate. So that's always a good thing. And he did the meme, George. I love it. You did the meme, man.
We had a lot of good memes from that. We had the T-pose.
Yep.
We had the Yabba Dabba Doo on
Yep.
the radio. That one actually had me laughing. I was like, "Oh man, it's like cringy, but in a great way."
They said that in the post race, and I was kind of so in my own Lando head during that I wasn't paying attention. And I went back and, oh wow, George really did say "Yabba Dabba Doo" on the radio. Well, that's kind of cool. But anyway, so that turned out to be a lot more entertaining than we all thought it was going to be, especially 2/3 of the way in. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll recap what this did to all of the driver and constructor standings. There are a couple of interesting changes. Some races are definitely getting tighter throughout all that. And then we're going to open it up to your takes on what you saw this weekend. The fan email segment. Our people are in. I have them in the order that they were sent to me. And it might be a little bit different than what we're used to.
Whoa.
So
Okay.
hang on. You want to be there for that. We will definitely do that. We will hand out some awards. We will not talk prediction results because I didn't make any. And because you were kind of out of pocket. But instead of predictions, we will actually drop a very interesting show announcement. This is something that I'm finally glad that we're going to be able to pay off. So you're not going to want to miss it. We talked about this a few recordings ago. It kind of fell through. This one, we're pretty confident we're going to do. It's going to happen later this week. It's exciting. You're not going to want to miss it. So stay tuned throughout all of it. We're going to get into all of this in just a little bit. Come on right back. You are listening to the Outlap F1 podcast, and we'll be right back after this quick pit stop. Grab your flu powder, broomstick, or apparate to your favorite audio streaming service to join the discussion on Hogwarts, a podcast, where Dan and his friends have in-depth chapter-by-chapter breakdowns of each Harry Potter novel. Join the group as they dive into the magical world and discuss plot points, analyze character development, and occasionally go off the rails. Whether you're a muggle who's new to the series or a pure-blood wizard who won't need a remember-all, Hogwarts, a podcast, brings everyone to the Great Hall for a magical discussion. Hogwarts, a podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, welcome back. This is Season 6. This is episode 24 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's the 2024 Austrian GP review show. You've got Andy, and I'm back with Cody tonight. Just quick little shout out to Dan for doing his darndest to do sub duty while you were gone. Thought he did an amazing job. Check out Dan at Hogwarts, a podcast. If you're into the world of Harry Potter, that's what he does when he knows what he's talking about. Thought he did a really good job of trying to veer into something that he didn't really know. It was fun to kind of do a podcast with him. I haven't really done recording with Dan for a long time, so it was kind of it felt familiar but different kind of all at the same time. So it was kind of an interesting dynamic. So go check out our Spanish review episode. It's out on all of the platforms as well if you are so inclined. If you haven't already done so, because I know a number of you already have. So, all right. So after this round, we're going to take a look at where the driver standings break down. We're going to look at their team standings breakdown. Cody, if you do the drivers, I will take the teams.
All right. Still holding on to first place in the driver standings is Max Verstappen for Red Bull. And ironically, he actually opens up the gap to second more with how things ended up than if he had finished first and Lando finished second. He ends up gaining 10 points on Lando Norris in second place with McLaren. So Max Verstappen has 237 points, while Lando Norris has 156. Just behind Lando in third place is Charles Leclerc, who did not have really any haul this weekend. He is sitting with Ferrari on 150 points in third. His teammate, Carlos Sainz, in fourth place with 135 points. Sergio Perez seems to be just, slipping down the order lately. Sergio Perez, fifth place with Red Bull with 118 points. Oscar Piastri, after that strong P2 finish, he is just behind Sergio Perez with 112 points. And now, because of that race win, George Russell hot on Piastri's heels again. George is in 7th with Mercedes with 111 points, so only 1 point behind Oscar at the moment. 8th place, his teammate, Lewis Hamilton, the other Mercedes, with 85 points. We didn't really talk much about it, but Lewis Hamilton actually had a pretty good haul this weekend, finishing 4th, I believe. So, yeah, 8th place, 85 points. Fernando Alonso holding on to 9th for now, and with the way things are shaken out, could be still holding on to 9th for a long time. He's with Aston Martin at 41 points. And then 10th place, Yuki Tsunoda, driving for RB with 19 points.
Yep. So your team standings after this round of the F1 Championship are as follows. No surprise here. Red Bull Racing Powertrains in P1. They are up to 355 points, even though it wasn't as big as a haul as they necessarily could have had. P2 is still Ferrari. They are up to 291 due to the good results from Carlos Sainz here. In P3, McLaren Mercedes now hot on their heels. It's down to 23 points. I think it was maybe a month ago I was saying it was 80. Now it's down to 23. So keep it going, Papaya Nation. Let's do this thing. P4, Mercedes. They have now gotten on the pace, and they have found some good points. They are up to 196 points. Well clear now of Aston Martin, who do not move from where they were in the previous round. They remain on 58 points. 6th place is the V-Carb team. Thanks to Daniel Ricciardo, they get a couple points here. Also get a couple points, I think, from the sprint as well. So they are up to 30 points on the season. P7, the big non-Red Bull, non-McLaren point haulers on the day. We're the Haas team, believe it or not. Double points for them. A good sprint as well. They are now up to 19 points, so that P6 battle might not necessarily be done and dusted just yet. P8 is Alpine. They are now up to 9 points. Again, another good point showing for Pierre Gasly here. P9 is Williams. They remain on the 2 points, and in P10, wow, it looks like a chasm for these guys at this point. Really, it really does. Kick Sauber Ferrari, 0 points, and doesn't look like anything's coming anytime soon. Yowza. All right, so you have heard our take on all of the incidents and all of the sessions and all this, and now it's time to open it up to our favorite segment of the evening, the fan email segment, and we shall start. And what I'm going to do from here on out, I don't want to define rules as when the race ends and who writes stuff when. I'm just going to go by timestamp. So if you have your thoughts together and you don't have to edit it, my only rule is you have to send in your whole thing. That's what you're going to get your timestamp on. So we're going to start. It is not Rachel Fleming this weekend. It is Dave Doherty who takes pole position in the fan emails, coming in right after the checkered flag fell. So Cody, it's your time to shine. What do we have here in the fan emails?
All right. I believe probably for the first time ever, our first fan email comes from Dave Doherty, and he says, "Hi team, I hope I'm in front of Fleming. But let's talk about Hamilton. What were your thoughts on the penalty that Hamilton received in the quali and in the race? Yeah, you got the 5-second penalty. But do you think it was a penalty on both parts of the weekend? What were your thoughts? And what are your thoughts on the sprint? Do we need it still?" And then he goes on to say, yes, Mercedes won. So I'm guessing Dave is a Mercedes fan, or perhaps just a fan of anyone not named Max Verstappen to win a race at this point in time. I actually, in the midst of all the craziness with Max and Lando, completely forgot Hamilton even got a penalty out of any of this. And so I'm drawing a big blank here. I don't even remember when it happened or what it was for.
All right, so I got you here. This was, I think, on the first pit stop. You have that odd pit entry, and you have that. I think it's one of the only circuits that has this, where you have like this diagonal commit line, and what you have to do is you have to keep all 4 of your tires to the right of that commit line. You cannot be on the line or over the line to the left, because if you do that, you're now signifying to the rest of the world that you're going around for another lap and you're not coming into box. Lewis was called into box. He had what I would say was kind of an unfortunate slip of grip or something, and he kind of not half spun, but he caught it. But what happened was he was coming into box, the car jinked on him, and then it caused one of the tires to go over that line. And because of that, he was assessed a 5-second penalty. Now, the precedent for this was set way back with F3 and F2 earlier in that day. I actually went back and saw the F2 feature race. And that exact same thing happened to one of the drivers there. It wasn't as blatant of a slip. He was just trying, I forget who the driver was, but I know he got exactly the same thing in a 5-second penalty. So when I saw it happen here, I went, well, if they follow the precedent that they set for the junior formulas, that's got to be a 5-second penalty by letter of the law. And sure enough, it was. The bigger issue for Lewis, Charles, to a lesser extent, Oscar, because he actually escaped the damage, was the damage that they got into each other on lap 1, turn 1. That actually proved to be a much bigger thing, I think, throughout all Lewis's race. He was complaining, and I think the team even said he had a bit of floor damage. So he was not necessarily at 100% for all of the race. Still manages to come home in P4 in spite of all that. So, he still knows how to wheel a race car, especially around the Red Bull ring. So that was kind of the overall tenor of other than George, being there when he needed to be there, on the pace, in position to capitalize should there have been a problem. Lo and behold, there was. Bang, George takes the win. Lewis, some decent pace early, fell a little bit back after he got the damage, but still manages to come home with a relatively strong position. I think that was a good overall drive. I think if you're a Mercedes fan, you should be very happy with this result here, especially for what it does for both the driver and the team standings. Thoughts on the sprint? Every time we do a sprint, I yo-yo back and forth on this. I like the fact that there's some Friday running that's meaningful. I really do. I like the fact that there's that sprint quali session. It's definitely a lot more interesting than free practice 2, where really the only thing I care about is the long run pace at the end, because it's not a harbinger of things to come. We've seen it so many times. There's the darling of Friday. Oh, look, Mercedes is in P1 and P2 in free practice 2. And then we get to qualifying, and where are they? P6 and 7. It just shakes out that way. The fact of the matter is, it's about resource preservation throughout the course of the weekend, and it's really about preserving tires while trying to learn as much as possible. That's the thing of practice. So to do away with a practice session in favor of a sprint qualifying where at least they're all trying, they're not going flat out as they necessarily are in the main qualifying session, as you can kind of see with the lap times. Usually the main one is still a little bit quicker, but it's a good attempt under some stress. It puts the teams under some stress to do a practice, calibrate a car, send them out for a quali session. Let's see where they line up. I like that. The sprint itself is going to definitely depend on, I think, the tone and the tenor of what the drivers want to do during that sprint. Lando went hard in the beginning, and I thought to myself, oh my God, this is going to be an epic sprint. They're going to be taking dive bomb moves at Max. And if it's not Lando, it's Oscar going to try it, and we're going to see what happens. And then it just all sort of petered out, because I think after the initial stuff, I think everybody kind of realized, whoa, we still got stuff to happen that's bigger and more important. And if I do have one tweak of where the sprint is, they need to do something with the points. That should be, I think, the next thing. You got to give more motivation for more teams to really be in the sprint. Because if you're after P8, I don't think you were even on camera. I don't even think we saw you. Because it just really doesn't matter. It turns into your long run in FP2 anyway. And I think that's how a lot of teams attack it. So if you're in like P15, unless you have a car that is capable of overtaking half the field, what's your motivation to really hang it out there? You don't have any. So that, I think, is the shortcoming of the format where it is now. It's definitely better. It flows better. I don't feel quite as exhausted, because it was this kind of weird thing when they did it the way that they used to do it of, we got the main qualifying. All right, I'm really excited. Now put that to the side. You do the sprint thing. And then I'm really excited for the sprint. And then the sprint thing ends, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. it all resets and goes back to, oh, wait, what happened then? And then you're just all over the place. And from a mentality standpoint, it's hard to follow. I do think, just in seeing some of the social media reaction, I do think people are putting way too much into the sprint, because I'm like, wow, it's like hot take city sometimes. And I'm like, we're only talking about 8 points. That's, in a normal race, that's P6. Like, if you went from P6 to out of the points, were you going to be that affected? Probably not. Just saying. Just saying.
Now, I like the sprint, and I think they are doing a pretty good job of honing in on what they really want the sprint to be, which is they want it to be impactful. They want it to make a difference in the points, but they don't want to take too much away from the importance and the flair of the main Grand Prix. And I think that's kind of why they're still not awarding too many points. And you got to remember, we've already come a long way from what the sprint was in 2021.
That's
where
true.
The points were like completely meaningless. So what was it? 3 points for first,
Yeah.
2 for second, and 1 for third. Like practically inconsequential. We've already come a long way for that. 8 points, yeah, really not too much, but you figure it's still about a third of an actual Grand Prix victory. And given that the race distance is about a third of the Grand Prix race distance, I think it kind of tends to make sense. And I do think it's fun. You have, now that there are a little bit more points on offer, it's kind of this divide between, do you want to play it safe so that you don't cause yourself any issues going into the Grand Prix, or do you want to, try to capitalize and get a few points? I think the sprint format is really a good time for those teams like Haas, like Aston Martin, unfortunately, at the moment, like Williams, like Alpine, that are towing that line during the Grand Prix of only getting a few points. I think the sprints are a good time for them to really shoot for the stars and try to, capitalize on the top teams playing safe and then perhaps getting a few points out of it. It makes all the difference for them. So I would say if they're going to make the sprint worth more points, in my opinion, they shouldn't go ham. If anything, I would say they could adjust it to make it so that it's just like the Grand Prix, where they award points to the top 10 finishers and just do like a 10 points for first and then go down by 1 point all the way down to 1 point for 10th. I think that would be really good. Because at that point, your normal people that would be finishing in 9th and 10th are still going to be getting points. I wouldn't go too much more beyond that, though, because that's when you start to get into the sprint is, starting to infringe on how important the Grand Prix is. And for that same reason, I don't think that they should, do what they do in the junior series where they have a sprint every race weekend. I think that the sprint, as I said earlier, should be kind of treated as a nice little treat that you get every once in a while for a little extra fun. And I think that they're kind of really honing in on that. As far as the Hamilton stuff goes, man, had I known that the front two were going to go to shit and that a Mercedes was going to win the race, I like George a lot, but I keep holding out hope here that Hamilton is going to squeeze out one more win while he's in a Mercedes. I think it would be a fantastic send-off for his time at Mercedes, which has been massively impactful to his career and to the sport overall. Incredibly dominant during his time here. And the fact that we could go potentially 2022, 23, 24 without Hamilton win would just be really disappointing, and would not be a good cap to his time there. So that all said, I really wish that he had been the top performer of the Mercedes this weekend, because I think this was as good a chance as any that he's going to get all year to get that victory, and he just wasn't the guy that was there. It was George, and I really hope that he gets another shot at it before the season's over.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Clearly, I think the trajectory for Mercedes is looking up. They seem to be getting more and more closer to it. They're not necessarily at that McLaren or Red Bull level yet, but that's not far off. And like I said before, they have clearly gone in front of Ferrari, where that was not the case earlier this season. They're clearly the third quickest team. You can make some hay there, and hay they made this weekend because of it. So I definitely think if you're a Mercedes fan, and I know Dave's a big Mercedes guy, you should be excited and interested to see what happens every weekend, because if the Lando Max thing takes the turn that it could go, and we end up seeing more and more incidents between these two, there's going to be opportunities for everybody else to come in and pick up a win. And, again, it goes back to, you just have to look at this in context of how freaking dominant Max was last year and how much of a statistical anomaly that really was, because this is really much more. Max is still good. He's still going to probably win the Drivers' Championship, hands down, not even going to be close. But he's not perfect like he was so much last year. It's not infallible. It's not invincible like you thought it was. You go into this weekend going, well, if we can do this and if we can do that, maybe Max is gettable. And this was a weekend that it looked like we were back to the old Max. Until 20 laps to go, I'd have told you, well, my headline of the day is Max is back. Uh-oh. And then it all flipped.
Yep, I totally agree. Thank you very much, Dave, for your email. Now we're going to move on to P2 for this week, which, to be fair, is still better than Max Orlando. Hey, so P2, Rachel Fleming. Thank you, Rachel, for your email. And she says, so firstly, I am doing a Max Lando incident and will allow the Formula a George Russell style victory. Well, funny enough, didn't go to the Formula this time. But did go to Dave. So Mr. Formula, you're going to have to give it another shot next time. But then she goes on to say, who saw that coming about 10 laps in? I'm guessing that Rachel probably had to change some of her headlines going into this last minute. She says, so the incident, all on Max. Max squeezed Lando, and they did come together, and it took Lando out of the race. That, for me, shouldn't have been a 10-second penalty for Max. No, it should have been a grid job for the British Grand Prix. Alonso even got the fastest lap, so Max couldn't get that point. A little bit of justice, at least. I don't think anyone woke up thinking George Russell will win this race. It just goes to show that F1 will surprise you once in a while, and George did keep it clean. But that win for Oscar is coming. I can feel it. I would like to know how Ferrari thought Charles would get into the points when they kept pitting him, and he didn't in the end, despite the fact that Max and Lando ended up crashing out. Charles must be one of the unluckiest drivers in recent years. I will second that. Just want to finish on the fact that you have to watch every lap of an F1 race. You never know. Something might just happen after all. Thank you, Rachel. A lot of good points there. Yes, definitely this was a case of if you turn off the race early, you missed the best part. It came right down to the wire at the end, and we got a surprise winner, which is fantastic. Love to see it. Definitely Charles he must have used up all of his luck for Monaco. And, he's probably actually okay with that, I would think, at least right now. It's got to turn around for him sometime, though. He is too talented for it to not. I think maybe he's just going through a rough spot of luck, and Ferrari is not looking as competitive as they did at the beginning of the season. But as we've seen with the upgrades so far, that can shake up still. So we've got a lot of season left. I don't even think we're quite to the halfway point, or we're right around the halfway point. So plenty of time for things to change. No, I definitely did not think George was going to win this race. To be frank, even with Max and Lando ending up not competing for the win by the end, I still don't think I would have pinned it on George. Probably would have pinned it on Oscar. But yeah, it was definitely a surprise. And yeah, that Grand Prix victory for Oscar is coming. He's in the same boat now as Lando was at the beginning of the season, where his performance is great. You know it's going to happen at some point. You just got to have things line up properly for him to get it. I really wouldn't be surprised if he got a win by the end of the season, honestly, and would be very happy to see him do so. Lastly, for the Max Lando incident, yes, I would put the fault of it on Max for the collision that they had. He did not really afford Lando enough room on the outside, and he did that just last little move, getting into the turn, that last little move to the left that ended up causing the contact. So yes, I would say he's at fault. I don't think, in my opinion, that it should have been a grid drop. I think the 10-second penalty was probably the appropriate punishment. They gave him the penalty for the contact. They said, look, you're at fault. Here's your time penalty. It does kind of sting, perhaps, that it ended up being pretty inconsequential just because of the gap he had to P6. But I feel like a grid drop should be for something worse. Like a grid drop would be, to me, for something that is like a breach of potential safety, or a more egregious wrecking of another driver. Like what did we see? We saw a grid drop for Perez where he came back to the pits with his car in unsafe condition, I believe is what it was.
Yeah.
Before, to me, that is more warranted, because you might be strewing debris across the track that could cause some issues. It could be dangerous, to try to bring the car back in that condition. I feel like that's kind of, or repeated offenses in a race maybe could result in a grid drop. And I guess you could say he did have repeated offenses during this battle, but I wouldn't say I saw anything so egregious that it really warranted something like a grid drop. I mean, they came together and they went boop, and they just happened to both get punctures out of it. I don't think it was intentional, and I don't think it was really that severe. It was just unfortunate, and Max, he got the penalty, so they definitely made the decision that he was at fault.
Yeah, I mean, I heard a great bit of technical knowledge about the tires, and why is it that sometimes you can bang tires and they're fine, and it looks like, well, that should have been a puncture, but somehow it's not, and yet in other places it doesn't look like there's that big a contact, and the tire delaminates and goes flapping everywhere. So what gives when it looks like they're half the contact but twice the result? It's where in the tire the contact happens. And there's a portion of the tire right when it attaches itself to the rim that is technically called the bead of the tire. And if you make contact in the bead of the tire, it's going to delaminate. That's just what's going to happen. And that, unfortunately, is where the contact on both Lando and Max's tires was right in the bead of it. Front wing of Lando hits the bead of Max's tire. And when Max is trying to push Lando off there, his rear tire hits the bead of Lando's tire in just the perfect way that it caused a slower at the time puncture. And Lando was trying to hurry up and trying to get back to the pits, and then it exasperated it. And then you saw all the carbon fiber going all over the place. So to the first point about a grid drop, and I agree with you, Cody, grid drops should only kind of be reserved for a couple situations. One, if you are unable to serve your penalty within the context of the race, either with unbeing able to serve it because you have retired, or because you are unable to take it because you can't get it added to your lap time. It was interesting at the end. We didn't really get a chance to talk about it. Couple very interesting things. And I noticed there was only one really publication who picked it up. If you watch when Lando comes back, McLaren waited 5 seconds to touch the car. Now, in light, they didn't know whether or not Lando was going to be classified or not. It actually came down to that lap. If that contact happens one lap earlier and McLaren touches the car within 5 seconds, Lando would have been unable to serve his 5-second penalty and would have been given a grid drop for the British Grand Prix, more than likely 3 places. One, McLaren played it safe by waiting the 5 seconds, so the penalty is served irregardless. But because Lando is technically classified, that 5 seconds was served. It was done. Now, it turned out not to matter. So even if McLaren had touched the car within the 5 seconds, they would have just added it on to his P20, and he would have finished in more P20. But he would have been at least able, because he was classified, to have served it, so it wouldn't have gone over. That was one thing. I get the argument about the justice doesn't fit the crime, but I go back to, we've had how many committees on contact between drivers? We've had select groups. We've had rules committees all meet. What we have now is basically what's been agreed to. So I can't get mad at the stewards for finally following the rules that they set out. When they agreed to give a penalty, I thought the adjudication, that's the penalty for that situation. Good, bad, or indifferent, that's what we've all agreed should happen. It's more than the 5 seconds we were getting in the past. Now, in this situation, Max and Lando were so far ahead, it didn't end up mattering. But that's a circumstantial thing, not necessarily a justice thing. The things with the stewards that I was frustrated with, one, you should have handed out Lando's 5-second penalty a hell of a lot faster. What the fuck were you investigating? Like, once he goes off the third time, I said, well, that's done. You might as well put the graphic up. And then it went noted, and then it said forever to finally get to investigating. And then Lando's retired the car, and they're finally flashing the graphic that he has the penalty. I'm like, that took you that long? Whatever. That one was pretty open and shut. The other one that made me mad for Max, on Max's side, was the third incident. How that isn't going off track and gaining an advantage. What he did there, he kept the lead because of it. Like, so that's, if you wanted to give an additional penalty anywhere, that's where I would have done it. And maybe you say, that's a 5 more seconds, or that's 10 more seconds. Maybe then that changes the position a little bit. Maybe then that sends a warm message to Max. Hey, you got 4 penalty points out of this race, bud. He only gets 2 here. You know, maybe that becomes more of a deterrent moving forward. I think that was what Andrea Stella was talking about in his post-race sound. Those quotes are out there. I encourage you to go find them. So that's kind of my ultimate view on the incidents and how they were adjudicated. I didn't think George Russell was going to win this race. George Russell was 20 seconds behind the Lando Max battle. I was not marking him. I was not thinking of anything. I was watching Oscar come up on signs and going, well, maybe that happens. And then, lo and behold, there's George, and then there's Oscar, and, we got a whole different show that we're watching for the last 4 laps. But, kudos to George for being in the right place at the right time. I mean, you still got to be there. Regardless of what you thought, he got to be there. Charles Leclerc has some bad luck, especially when the engine decides to go into anti-stall in the sprint quali. And I did not understand that strategy at all. We'll talk about that when we get to awards. But Rachel, I love your last comment. I've said this forever. The sport will give it to you when you least expect it. Yet another example here.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree. And last point. I don't even think George Russell woke up thinking George Russell will win this race. Thank you again, Rachel. Our last email comes in from the Formula P3 this week. And the Formula says, just finished watching on demand while delayed at O'Hare. For me personally, I've ever actually been fortunate enough to never have the pain of being delayed, at least at O'Hare. Not for long. Shocking that I was delayed, right? I guess it happens a lot. I'm just really lucky. In fact, I wrote this to you as I'm doing laps around Concourse C to get some exercise in. Now that I do understand. I'll probably get a full race distance of laps in during this 4-hour delay. Oof, ouch. Anyway, I hope you guys can think of something, or I hope you guys can think of some more effective ways to impose penalties. Far too often, the driver on the receiving end of the infraction gets a DNF, while the violator gets a 10-second penalty that doesn't amount to much. What about an in-race grid drop penalty applied when the race finishes? Ooh, man. It would be more of a deterrent and reserved only for collisions causing a DNF. Thoughts? Also, great race for Nico. Also, the Formula Sun's name. Very nice. Good to know. It's a good name. A lot of very strong Formula One drivers with the Nico name.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your email, Mr. Formula. As far as the penalties, Andy kind of touched on this already with the yes, the penalty might not feel like it really does justice, at least in this sense, because it ultimately doesn't change Max's finishing position when Lando ended up retiring. But as Andy said, this is the penalty that was agreed upon to be given out for such an incident, and it was what they gave out. So I think it was the proper punishment dished out in this situation. Also, we didn't know that Lando was going to retire. In fact, he ended up making it back to the pits ahead of Max. Perhaps had he, I guess he ended up having the damage to the wing and they decided to retire the car on that. Or maybe had too much damage from the tire delaminating and kind of ripping apart the car there. But yeah, we didn't know he was going to retire necessarily at that point. And at that point, you also get into the kind of weird slippery slope of, well, then when such an incident happens, does one team purposely retire the car to cause a greater punishment to be dished out to the other guy? You can kind of see how you get to a slippery slope if you're only dishing out particular types of penalties. When one driver ends up with a DNF, it would get, I think, a little too messy. I also think an in-race grid drop penalty would be perhaps a little too heavy-handed, because a 10-second penalty, if the cars are running close together, is pretty substantial. I mean, if a driver were to end up getting a couple of those in one race, or we see that happen with track limit violations where penalties stack up, or we've seen it with Magnussen. You can get a lot of penalties in one race, trust me. But I feel like an in-race grid drop gets to be a little too severe, because you get in a little bump, you cause this collision. Yeah, it's not good. You're getting penalty points on your license though, and you're getting the time penalty. If you're still 60 seconds, or that would be a really extreme case, but if you're like 20 seconds in front of the next driver, I don't think that a little bump like that really warrants you finishing behind that next driver. In this case, it was partially a self, inflicting penalty. Like Max already got somewhat punished for the incident by ending up down in 5th place, because he ended up getting a flat tire as well. It had to come back to the pits, and it's not like he, took out Lando DNF'd and Max went on to win the race or finish P2 or something like that. Like, he already was punished by the incident and then had the 10 seconds on top of that. So I think it was the appropriate punishment.
Yeah, I mean, the idea behind why do we do time penalties and not position drops or something like that is the idea that certain penalties can somehow be served and then cleared, and you can then go out and do your thing. If you want to give it to Max here, then Lewis Hamilton doesn't win the 2021 British Grand Prix, because that was a much scarier incident. Max Verstappen goes teaming into the wall. He DNFs. Lewis gets the exact same penalty, got a 10-second time penalty, used his pace, used his pit stops, used strategy, overcame it, and went on to win the race. Now, everybody wants to, how do you make it fair? I don't think it's designed to be perfectly fair. It was a racing thing that happened. It sucks. I threw my hat. I was listening to Lando come back to the pits, and his engineers trying to tell him, put the car in red A10, which apparently is the emergency, I got a puncture mode. And Lando's like, I am in red A10. And then he gets to the end, and you just go, this car is fucked. We're done. It's heartbreaking. And you listen to Lando's post-race sound, and it's heartbreaking. And I was just as upset as anybody else, but I wasn't. I can't get to the camp of we ought to be taking Max out of the race for doing that. Now, if you want to make the penalty worse for Max, call multiple things on what Max did in the different incidents. Put a penalty on the first move where he moved under braking. That was incorrect. Put a move on the third incident where he goes off the track and gains an advantage. If you stack enough of them, if you ended up giving Max 2 10s and a 5, he's going to change his driving style. But you got to be confident enough in your rule book, stewards, and you got the tools all right there for you. You just got to play them. You know, I don't think we need to start reinventing penalty situations necessarily. And I also want to give drivers a chance to overcome a penalty. I would have loved to have watched if Lando had gotten past, could he have pulled out the 5-second gap?
Mm-hmm.
Because he went off track 4 times. I saw it. I agreed with it. Like there, I have no defense. Lando was guilty because he got the strike. He went off, and as soon as he went off, I'm like, God damn it! But then I also said, get on your horse, get past. I was not calling Max very nice things at that minute. Get past that guy and go on and get your gap and 5 quality laps to try to pull out that gap, because my nightmare scenario is what the hell happens if Lando gets like a 4.5 second lead and it gets taken from him in the stewards room. You know, we could have had a whole different discussion, lots of different discussions about what could have happened here with the rules that are in place. But I think if the goal is to get Max to not do it, call multiple things on when he does multiple things wrong. And I think that'll fix itself.
Very well said. Thank you, Formula, for your email, and thank you to everyone for your submissions. I do like the the banter between you for getting in the emails first. It's very funny.
No, I love it. I'm enjoying this every time we do this. I like I said, it's my favorite segment of the whole thing now. All right. So I share Cody's thing and say thank you to everybody who contributed to that. We will now transition into our awards, the rubbish analysis paralysis, the dark horse, and the driver of the day. We will start, as we always have to do, with the rubbish. We've talked a lot of rubbish, but we may have a couple things more. I will just go first with this one. And I'm just going to say this. It's called the Max Verstappen rule for a reason, man. Yeah. I really don't have a defense for you here. You got penalized. I hope you learned something. I hope the next time this happens, it's not as fatal to one of the drivers in terms of fatal in that the car could not continue. We definitely don't want to talk about fatal in the other sense. But yeah, it's called the Max Verstappen rule for a reason. So I'm putting Max into the rubbish bin.
Yeah, the thing is, though, is I feel like Max is the type who it doesn't matter if he's running at the front or in the middle or near the back. I think no matter what the situation, he's going to race really aggressively. Yep. So I don't foresee things changing with how he's racing anytime soon.
I tend to agree. I don't think we're just going to – he's going to show up. He's not going to show up in Great Britain and go, I've seen the light. I shouldn't have done that. And I'm going to change my ways. I don't see that. If that happens, I'll tweet something about it for sure.
I think it would almost be even better if he came out at the British Grand Prix. He said all that stuff, and then in the race, he just pretty much went, I'm going to freaking do it again.
There you go.
My rubbish award is going to I can see where you're coming from with the Max stuff, and I do think he was driving pretty unfairly at some of those points. But my rubbish award is actually going to go to Max's teammate, which I'm pretty sure I've given Perez the rubbish award before, and that is because Max had a multi-lap fight with Norris. He had a slow pit stop. He had a puncture from his fight with Lando. he had an unscheduled pit stop because of that puncture, where he was trundling around the track most of the way with a flat. And he still beat Sergio Perez by 2 positions. It's getting kind of sad at this point. I don't know if it's the fact that, Perez he's been in this game for a while. I don't know if it's just that he's feeling like he's getting close to the end of his career and he just doesn't quite have it anymore. I don't know if it's because, that second seat at Red Bull seems to be a meat grinder, but something's not going here with Sergio Perez, and it seems to just be getting worse. I mean, his last bunch of results have been, I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but it's something like an 8-8 retire 8. It's really looking bad for him here. Maybe that Red Bull isn't quite the top tier car at the moment. It is one of the top tier cars, though. It's, maybe, we hear people saying that maybe the McLaren is the fastest car now. I don't know, but it's definitely not a Kick Sauber. So he should be doing something better than what he is doing with that car right now.
Yeah, definitely. I get your point, and well put, by the way. I love he did this and he still couldn't beat him. Oh my God. All right. So we will move into analysis paralysis. I'll go first on this one. And my analysis paralysis is pretty simple. Did Charles Leclerc have any tires left at the end of that one? If so, I would love to find them. I don't think he had a new set of anything at the end of that race. I mean, unless it was absolutely out of need, or maybe he had a slow puncture. Maybe there was something that I didn't know. But those pit stop timings after the first lap incident seemed odd to me. And they kept telling him, we think we can get points. We think we can get points. And he gets close. He gets to P11, but not good enough. And it didn't work. So whatever plan Z was, you might want to rethink plan Z.
Yeah, I am in agreement. Charles Leclerc, so many pit stops, so little success. Any more pit stops and they would have had to throw on the tires from his road car. It did not work out for him this time around.
All right, very good. We'll move into our dark horse of the day, and I'll go first with this one. I'm giving mine, and I finally get to use this. I get to do Nico Hülkenberg gets my vote for dark horse of the day. Haas really seemed to go well at this track. Their best result ever, I think, has been P4, and it came here. He gets P6 here and showed really well all weekend. Thought he got a raw deal in the sprint with the penalty he got. You were talking about all the penalties that people got. Yeah, I thought he got a raw deal. I didn't think that was worthy of a 10-second, but I guess, again, that's why I'm not a steward. But Nico Hülkenberg for coming home good for Haas this weekend.
My dark horse is actually going to be George Russell. We already discussed how nobody woke up thinking that George Russell was going to get the win, including George Russell. And I think the fact that he did get that win right at the end by some serious luck makes him the dark horse to end all dark horses.
Very good. All right, so we'll move into driver of the day. I didn't want to give George Russell the dark horse. I like the fact that you did. So I'm giving him for driver of the day. And it's really simple. He was there when the opportunity presented. Sometimes doors open in life and you have to be there to pounce on the opportunities. George Russell was in the right place at the right time because he earned that for being quick throughout the course of the weekend. It was completely on merit. And that's what happens when the front two collide. There's been so many times where I would watch Lando come home in P3 where I'm like, can't the top two do that? And it just never happens. So for everybody who's a George Russell fan who's like, can't the top two do that? Well, this one's for you. George Russell gets the win. Cody, what you got here for your driver of the day?
I like that you had Russell as driver of the day. As you said, definitely well-deserved. I'm going to give driver of the day, though, to Oscar Piastri because he had the mishap with the very narrow track limit violations in qualifying that ended up knocking him all the way down to P7. But thanks to some really hard fought racing and that really awesome move on Sainz, as well as a little help from the top two taking each other out, Piastri makes it all the way up to P2. And I don't think most people thought that Piastri was going to get up that high either. So he gets my driver of the day.
All right. Very good. So this would be the point had we been together to make predictions. We would have gone through them. But as we were not, we did not. But in lieu... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm pretty sure, based on how this went, that a lot of our predictions probably would have been pretty far off the mark.
Yeah, I think... well, we might have had some. We probably would have had the pole. We might have had sprint pole. I might have gone homer and put Lando in one of the pole positions, so I probably would have lost on that. Sounds like one of those weekends where you like beat me 3-2. So maybe, that's kind of where we'll call it there. As I think squeaked by you a little bit in Spain by those little narrow margins. So anyway, we will get back to doing our predictions. And instead of really talking about real predictions, we're going to talk about something that we are finally excited. I can finally say we're going to get this over the line. We had a few weeks ago, I had kind of teased, we had something kind of cooking in the pipeline. We couldn't make it work then. We were approached not only once, but this is actually the second time, by a publicist for an author who had written a book. And we were trying to set up an interview, and the first one, unfortunately, we couldn't make the timing work. When they were available, we weren't, and just vice versa. So it just didn't work out. It looks like we're going to zoom in on an actual interview. So we're going to be interviewing, as part of our British Grand Prix preview, Gilles Richards, who has written a book called F1 Racing Confidential. So this is from their publicist. Guardian journalist Gilles Richards draws on more than a decade of experience working at the heart of Formula One to reveal the inner workings of the world's most glamorous motorsport, featuring exclusive interviews with men and women working at every level of F1 teams, including Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, Alfa Romeo, and Aston Martin. This is an unprecedented behind-the-scenes look at the complete workings of a modern Formula One team, with contributions from high-profile insiders, including Christian Horner, Lando Norris, and Toto Wolff, each with their own fascinating stories, insights, and revelations. F1 Confidential pulls back the curtain on the world of Formula One like never before. And the guy who's written all this is going to come talk to us about it. So we have a little bit of homework to do over the course of the next few days. I have a couple chapters of this thing I want to definitely read. There's the Lando Norris one that just has my name on it. But we're going to do that. And we hope we're going to drop this. We're technically scheduled, it's Monday when we're doing this recording. We're technically scheduled to do it Thursday morning. So I'm going to try to get it dropped by Thursday evening as part of our preview. It's going to be kind of an extra segment. We'll just kind of tack it on to a regular preview in lieu of a news segment. We'll still do the track facts. We'll throw in our predictions and we'll do all that stuff. But we are super excited about this. It's a wonderful opportunity. The lady who we've been dealing with, trying to get all the scheduling and everything, has been amazing. I really want to help promote this guy's book. I go buy this book. I'm just telling you right now. I've heard this thing was coming out. I'm going to definitely, even though I have technically the insider part of it, I don't know if I have to go buy it, but I might go buy it anyway because it's good for a coffee table book. But anyway, we are super excited about that. So that's what's coming down the pipeline. But anyway, with all that, any other final thoughts, Cody, before we head on out for the night?
Oh, just that it's crazy. I feel like I've just been thinking about Formula One nonstop with this triple header, which is not a bad thing. I see, super fan of the sport. Love doing the show here. So, and the cap to this triple header is one of the greats, British Grand Prix. I'm looking forward to it very much. I'm really, really looking forward to the battle between Max and Lando. And wouldn't it be great if Lando came out on top this time to take a home win? I think it's got epic written all over it, and I can't wait.
I'm going to say it right now. He qualifies P2, and he pulls the same move like he did last year, except this year it sticks, baby. That's where I'm going. So you can already tell where my predictions are headed. I think it's going to be Homer all the way. I don't care because we actually can. But anyway, we'll get into all that later this week. We've got this wonderful interview. We're going to actually play journalist here. So we hope we do it justice. We hope we do this all really well. That's what we're going to try to do. So yeah, for Cody, it's been Andy. This is always fun to do. Boy, we love this sport. Gives it to you when you least expect it. And may all your laps be fast.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Outlap F1 podcast. If you like what you heard, click that subscribe button and be sure to leave us a 5-star review. If you want to connect with us outside of the show, check out our website at www.outlapf1.com. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at OutlapF1 Podcast, or email us at chatnow@outlapf1.com. As always, thank you so much for your support, and we'll see you on the next one.